Let's start, before we dive in, with a question. Why value propositions in B2B sales? And to tackle that question, let's drive in reverse. Starting near the finish line, a customer's decision to buy. We've all been there through a chaotic B2B sales cycle, long and unpredictable responses from customers, customer teams. Then there's that sudden kind of moment of clarity, that sense that a decision is emerging. And it's funny how often when that happens, there's a new unmet buyer need. Show me the business case to buy. Can your sales team respond? It's a fact of life. B2B buyer decisions are a challenge. Buyers do the math. They analyze economic impact. A survey of buyer executives found that their finance teams help select vendors 90% of the time, help develop and review business and functional requirements 98% of the time, and help prepare and review financial justification and ROI analysis, they do the math, 95% of the time. Now let's move backwards, the middle of the sales process, where often there's a critical meeting where a team is trying to get a customer to engage and to commit to evaluate their alternative, the big presentation, where there may be diverse stakeholders, different interests, different bandwidth, yet more and more a need in B2B sales for consensus decision-making by the buyer. Often there are stakeholders who take meetings on tangents, who get stuck in the weeds. Can your sales team simplify and build consensus? It's interesting that a survey by the Aberdeen Group of sales and marketing executives found that their number one concern and their number one need was to improve positioning and differentiation in messaging and sales presentations. They need an ability to tell a better, unique story. Now let's go early in the sales cycle. That mysterious part where reps are preparing, engaging, qualifying. And more, the challenge for reps is that customers have plenty of other sources of information without them. They have online information. More and more, there's too much information at the rep side. And the majority of a rep's time is spent not selling, but preparing. The result, not enough qualified targets. The question, do reps have the right tools to engage the right people and fill the pipeline? A buyer survey, this time by Forrester, again, looking at company executives, found that the vendors who call on them tend to be very knowledgeable about their own company and their own products. But 4 out of 5 of those vendor sales reps don't understand the customer issue. They don't articulate how and where they can help. The result, only 1 in 8 of sales calls adding value, according to buyer executives. Value propositions provide clear answers to simple questions. What are the 3 things that make you better than the competition? And what is that worth? Value propositions are fluent in the business language of the customer. If you take a buyer perspective again, it's interesting to find that buyers find that the vendor that they choose in competition is more than likely to be the first vendor who gives them a clear path to value. But sellers find that value propositions deliver results as well by building sales confidence. If you look at B2B enterprises who use value propositions, they report that the opportunities where they use those value propositions generate 5 to 15% higher close rates and 5 to 25% higher price outcomes on the deals they close. So today we're going to dive into the question of how do you generate B2B value propositions that will be adopted by sales teams. We'll start by talking about the content and how you generate that content with quantified customer value. But we'll go beyond that and look at the function of the value proposition so that we're really looking at what kind of tools make value propositions actually useful for sales. And then the third and very important topic is we'll look at actual usability. How do you test and refine value propositions? So let's start on the content side. Quantifying customer value. Value models answer some central questions. Is your product or your offering better? How is it better and how much better is it? And what is that worth? In quantifying value, it really helps to have some kind of consistent framework. One very useful framework is that of economic value estimation, where the basic starting point is, let's think about a competitor as a reference value or some kind of what am I comparing the value I create to? Then where am I differentiated from that competitor or that reference point? What's my positive differentiation? It's always fair if you also consider and be ready to talk about where you might be worse or where there might be a transition cost. So think of that as negative value drivers. But before you're even talking price, you've begun to quantify the unique value you provide to the customer, quantitatively and visually, because you can add up these stacks if you get them right. Quantified value on that basis then can become the basis of pricing, where you can set a price designed to capture a meaningful share of your value, and then what's left over is a strong basis for communication. The customer gets the rest, and it's a win-win situation. How do you get started? 5 steps to good value content. Frame the discussion. Be clear about units. Think broadly. Be specific in quantifying. Test, iterate, test, iterate. I'm going to take each of these briefly in succession to talk a little bit more about the process. So let's start with how you frame the discussion. First, and maybe the obvious question, but it's very good to be clear on your offering or your product. What are you selling? What is the solution? What are your capabilities? What goes along with your offer? Second, who are you selling it to? What's a customer profile or a customer segment that you want to think about as you consider the quantitative value? Third, you always need that reference alternative. So who is the customer comparing you to? It's always important to think that way. And if you look at the overlap of all 3 of those elements, you're probably not in territory where you want to think much about a value proposition. It's a commodity area. Where the competitor may be better, maybe for some customers, again, maybe not the first area of focus, but your area of focus with your value proposition is where do you really have that differential value? Piece of advice number 2, be clear about units as you quantify, because being clear as you talk about numbers, you got to think per what? Customers want to hear answers quantified in their terms. Their finance people are always going to want accounting answers per year, per quarter, or over the life of a durable piece of equipment. Operating people may want operating answers per unit of the customer's output. If you start with a customer-centric unit, that's a great approach because it's a basis for setting up graphs and setting up stacks that give you the visuals where the items in the graph actually add up. Quantifying value drivers in product-centric units, if you're selling in kilograms or liters, or if you're selling in rolls of roofing material, that's often a path to confusion. And one of the elements of that confusion is as simple as the customer may not understand, but sometimes it can actually lead to mistakes from lack of clarity. So for example, if you have what we call an acquisition efficiency, where customers are actually looking at your product versus a competitive product, and they're actually considering purchases of different amounts of your good, as if you're selling an ingredient or you're selling a chemical, that can lead to mistakes. So always start with communicate, check, value and price in customer-centric units. 3, think broadly. Start with your product, your features, where are they different, but then look at the customer. Why should the customer care qualitatively before you get to quantitatively? The value in the customer's eyes and what is that worth to them? And it's important to be broad. Think cost reductions. Think revenue increases. Think risk reductions. 4th, be specific in quantification. So when you're actually getting into thinking about the value driver, you want to be specific. And there are only really 3 elements here of a value driver. The first is a formula based on how you understand the customer and what your product does for the customer. The second is data that helps you quantify your product or your solution's claims. And the third is background, economic, and specific customer operating data. And always when it comes to that, you're starting with benchmark data that may be broadly applicable, but you may be getting more and more customer specific here. Now it's interesting as you think about quantifying value, that value is more than measurable cost. So some value drivers are naturally quantified. Cost savings, well-studied outcomes-based value drivers. But other value drivers may seem less tangible. Sometimes revenue value drivers are this way, risk, brand value. It's funny how usually when you work at this, those intangible value drivers can be quantified. All it takes is creative discipline questions focused on the customer business, where early on in the process, precision is rarely essential. What you're trying to get to is some qualitative value proposition or value idea that you can then continue to improve. Finally, be agile. Test, iterate, test, iterate. Now, what do we mean? Start with good qualitative hypotheses. Start fast. Use available data, initial estimates. You can always improve things later. Test and improve estimates. Use the public sources, then move to interviews. See whether your ideas resonate. Take available research and continue to improve your understanding of customer situations. Test ideas on salespeople and on customers so that you get to V1 of a usable value proposition, but then continue to iterate agile style to V2, V3 that's really effective. There's a funny way that in value quantification, teams get hung up. So there's the B2B equivalent of writer's block, which is value analysis block. 3 sources that we see most often. First, the product or the solution may not be seen to be differentiated. Second, too many customers, too many competitors. Third, the data aren't good enough. Let's take each of those in turn. First, no differentiation. Some real questions here. When the team talks about a lack of differentiation, is that real, or are there some better places to look to find it? Differentiation is sometimes hidden in service, reliability, intangible value drivers that you can make quantitative if you work through the customer's business. If you're really in a situation where there's no differentiation, maybe it's time to prioritize other products for your value props, for your sales promotion, for your marketing, or reconsider the price. Objection 2, too many customer situations, offerings, and competitors. This often comes up when you're defining the framework, or step 1, where you're thinking about offering, customer, and competitor, where people get hung up. The answers are, well, it varies, it depends. Funny thing is, this is often useful information for later, because the questions of customer and competitor can begin to help you later as you think about segmentation or help organize value props for simple use in different customer situations. But the it depends answer should never cause gridlock. Get started, one useful case, then you can come back and account for complexity later. Third, and often the most ubiquitous of the objections are, the data aren't good enough. So how good do the data have to be? Let's go back to the 3 elements of our value driver. And let's look more specifically through a product's life cycle, where as customer value gets understood through a product life cycle, it's often used to answer different questions, so there are different uses, as well as different users. And we want to concentrate on that, so that as you understand it through a life cycle, value propositions evolve. They start, and then they improve, and they get cleaned up into a usable form. So let's look at some of that evolution, and let's look in terms of our 3 components of a value driver. Let's start with formulae. Often enough, a product manager starts simple. Then, as they understand their product better and better, as they understand its use cases better and better, they fill out their understanding of how their product helps their customers. It gets deeper, it gets more analytical. The important thing is getting to the value proposition, the need to simplify again to improve communication. But to get started, generate hypotheses, then test them. Experts, experienced reps can be helpful, selected customers. The second element, data that justify, depend, and support your product's claims. And those kind of data and the quality of those data depend on the timing. They also depend on industry standards in some sense, but there are a number of sources for that kind of data. First, clearly just starting with initial hypotheses to begin to frame the conversation, even to frame the questions you need to ask, perhaps in the R&D and launch process. But then as people begin to use the product or their specific applications, you get anecdotes. The information can come out of development work or studies, case studies for early adopters. Sometimes you've got early customers who do pilots that can provide very useful data you can use in other circumstances. Market research, customer interviews, surveys, all downstream, and ultimately outcomes. The third element is economic and operating data. Again, probably starting with benchmark, but getting customer specific. Where initial hypotheses help, publicly available sources are always a good place to think about. Experienced sales reps can help you with particulars here. Experts, customer interviews, surveys, case studies, pilots, early adopters, market research, outcome studies. But we start to get into this territory where your actual underlying databases of your own customer can help. And perhaps most important of all, as you get to specific business cases for your customers, are the sales conversations themselves as a way to capture customer-specific data. Charles Babbage, the father of modern programmable computers, put the question of data quality, I think, fairly clearly, if a little bit overly precisely. Errors using inadequate data are much less than those using all data at all. No data at all. So in sum, on value content and data quality, it's a process, not a destination. Be agile, quantify value fast, and then refine. So now let's move from content to function. And for many people, that's a new concept. For people who are used to using their own spreadsheets, thinking about how to make value content useful for others and useful for sales is sometimes a new topic. So we're going to talk about function. If there were a Nobel Prize for sales, I would certainly nominate Albert Einstein to double up, because he said it more clearly than almost anyone could have. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. There are three common value proposition traps. The first, most common of all, too much information, too complicated. Secondly, one that we see a lot is too much discovery required. The sort of value proposition that's nothing but an empty template with 30 questions to answer before you have anything to talk about with a customer. And third, and now we're getting into the digital age and digital era, is the value proposition that's there for one-way broadcast instead of a conversation. So remember your objective: sales usefulness, sales adoption. In designing useful value propositions for sales, each of those words matter. Design. Look at your branding. Look at your layout. This is marketing 101. And so if you've got a value proposition, you want to make sure it's something you would actually show to customers. Then, as you think about design, there's also the question of, is it functional? Is it easy to find, easy to understand? Is it clear? Useful. Who should be using it? What's their motivation to adopt? We're going to be talking about that more in our August webinar, but it's an interesting topic. How are they going to use it? Online, PowerPoint, call prep. Are they using it away from customers? Are they using your value prop live? How do you see them following up from a conversation? Third, the content itself. Does the value content and the way it's set up match the likely sales situation? Is content aligned with sales and pre-sales or subject matter expert use and conversations? Finally, put it in the context of the sales cycle. When, who, what are the objectives? Think about it in terms of who the audience is, the customer stakeholders. What do they want to know? And what do they want to know when? So let's take on usable value propositions, and let's look at this question of designing for easy use in likely sales situations. In doing that, let's return to the question of how you frame your initial value quantification in terms of customer, competitor, and offering. Start with a competitor. When you think about a value proposition for sales, it's not just about the next best alternative. It's really about a sales situation. What do you expect to be the reference points? Is their status quo or the way they're doing things today as an important reference point? Are there direct competitors? Second, think about the offering and variations in what it is that you're offering. Alternatives, gold, silver, bronze, the extent of customization of your offering and how do you make that easy? Do you have more than one pricing model? Do you price for some customers based on the transactions they execute in your product or your tool, and for others, maybe on an annual subscription or non-transaction basis? Third, customers. Are there a few key customer characteristics, situations, and objectives that actually help identify which messages are going to work best? The other customer question is there any data that you have, maybe in some of your databases, that can feed the value proposition? That can help make the sales process much more streamlined. So as you look through these questions and you think about the variations, then it becomes simple to say, how do variations in any of these dimensions change the data? And maybe what does that mean in terms of segments? And how do you think of making the value proposition itself flexible to make choice through the sales cycle? Next topic in usable value propositions is actually to think through the cycle itself and objectives. If you think about a typical sales cycle, it has steps, and they may not always occur in this order, and there may be other ones, but starting with a lead, you qualify it. With a qualified lead, you may be generating engagement. Sometimes the order of those two is reversed. Then sales is looking to step up the engagement with the customer by moving to get a commitment to evaluate your product. Before and during the evaluation process, then you're moving the customer to a consensus to actually make a decision to buy before they get into the T's and C's, documents, compliance, and negotiation. And so value propositions play really different roles depending on what your objective is, where you may be trying to assess, as you qualify, the actual customer potential to reach a buying decision in your favor. When you're generating engagement, you're trying to get the customer to invest a little time to consider, so you're highlighting your differentiation. When you're moving them towards a serious evaluation, then you're getting them to invest real time. And that's more a situation where you're actually getting into there being potential value by considering your product before you get into the details, where you're really building customer confidence, customer consensus. You're looking to validate. You're looking to, in some cases, de-risk the value that your product considers. So that by the time you're moving into finalization and documents, you actually have a business case to buy that's already shared, that becomes a basis for customer urgency to get through the process. So as you think about this in sales cycle terms, the value content itself often unfolds in almost the way you would peel an onion. And it's useful, as you think about that, to think about making your content, results, and your graphics useful in a way that matches the different sales stages and objectives. So let's take each of these stages in turn and talk in a little more detail what elements of value matter. So at the stage when you're looking to qualify, your objective is assess the potential that this customer might actually decide to buy. Is it the right company, the right person, and the right time? And the content for that may be little more than an illustrative case study or a situation where you're really trying to put in their mind the value that your product or solution has realized for others and how it has. It's answers here. It's a bottom line. And that bottom line is often being used almost to test their readiness and even to test whether you're talking to the right individual to help you steer a process. So the amount of discovery of your used in your value proposition at this point and the amount of customization may be very limited. As you move forward, though, your objectives change. So as you're generating engagement, you're really starting to get some customer buy-in. You're trying to get them to realize that your product is worth time to consider. So you're now highlighting the ways you're differentiated. You're highlighting your qualitative value drivers, and you're beginning to get to their potential impact. You're starting to connect the things your product delivers, the features, the benefits, and the value to the customer's business challenges. And you want to make sure that they resonate. So the discovery and customization at this stage, usually basic at most, apply, adapt the case study. When you're moving to this next stage, you're trying to get a bigger commitment out of the customer team. You're trying to get them to invest some serious time. So now you're really trying to get them into the potential value and the potential upside to them, not just of buying the solution, but at this point, it's spending the time to work through and actually evaluate it. So this is where the value content is getting deeper. How does your product deliver? What is your value driver? What are your value drivers? And even which value drivers resonate with which stakeholders. So you're beginning to get into using a value proposition to manage different audiences. Here, the discovery and customization may begin to get more extensive. You're getting customer basics. You're trying to get to representative economics for them. You may be beginning to get into how you would customize your solution for them. So that when you're finally in that evaluation intensive phase, and often this is a pre-sales or subject matter expert or sales engineer, that what you're really doing now is building customer stakeholder confidence in validated value. You, at this stage, are getting the business case to buy as a shared understanding between the sales team and the buyer. The value content now is value drivers, perhaps again for specific stakeholders, consistent details where evaluators may be asking the hard questions. And the discovery and customization, well, again, go as deep as you need. You want to be able to go there. If it's testing the sensitivity to assumptions, you want the flexibility to do that. Getting to the customized business case is good, but there's also no reason to boil the ocean. You want to tailor the conversation to the specific questions rather than covering the whole waterfront. So a value proposition that lets you address specific interests is important. Finally, at the time where you're moving into T's and C's, documentation, compliance, your real objective here is use the jointly owned business case. Support an urgency to finalize the deal. Now, you hope you're now working with validated value. You're back to the headlines. You're back to that point where you can deal with those final questions to get the deal done. So remember, sales is a team sport. Value proposition should provide focused content, consistent, usable content and layout, and shared content. Value propositions become a forum for sales teams to engage in customer-centric collaboration. So now we turn to usability, testing and refining the value proposition. Before any rollout, testing is critical. And I think it's always useful to think in terms of 4 relatively simple steps with a value proposition. So let's start with the author or one of the authors, where it's a good initial test of whether that value proposition is going to work for the author to present the value prop. Does the story flow? Is it simple and clear? Is it flexible enough to handle new information and objectives and objections? But go beyond the monologue presentation mode. So now you've got to ask, is the value proposition suitable for a conversation? Do the visuals somehow distract? Do they lead the customer to ask irrelevant questions? Do the visuals lead a customer to take the conversation on a tangent? Or do they support a conversation about the central considerations, your 3 points of differentiation and value drivers? Is it easy to address specific questions? Then continue to test as much as you can, but now move to new users of the value proposition. And a natural first new user for step 3 is someone other than the author or the groups of authors. So think subject matter experts who are reasonably proficient in how the customer does their business. They need to be able to use a value proposition to have a conversation. Can that subject matter expert find and highlight differentiators? Can the expert find answers to questions naturally? If you've done a good job there, then you get to what I think is the most important test of all, which is, can you step back to the onion before it's begun to be peeled? This is the question of, can a sales rep have an early conversation with the value prop? Can a sales rep use it to qualify, to get early engagement? Are the main points simple and clear to a non-expert occasional user? Is there flexibility on what can be discussed and what can be deferred? So keep refining, keep testing. So as we look at value propositions and using them scalably in organizations, a big topic of our next webinar, speed and agility drive adoption. Starting with content, you're moving through to making usable value props before you somehow make them widely available. But then it's important to understand who's using them, where, and how. So think about early, middle, late, who's involved. But always the central element is to drive sales adoption. And as value propositions are out there, it's important to gather feedback because you'll always continue to improve the content, and you should always continue to improve how you make that content accessible. Because this is about agility. This is about feedback and refinement. It's the new marketing. It's the new product management. What Oscar Wilde said about everyone 135 years ago applies to many salespeople today. Value propositions can give sales teams an edge. If your sales teams don't understand the value of your product, who will? Keep it clear and simple. That's the best way to build customer trust and customer collaboration. Thanks. Taylor?
Great. Thank you, Peyton, for sharing those insights. So we've had a few questions come in during the webinar, and there is still time to enter your question into the panel on your screen. While you're entering, a reminder to complete the 10-second survey while exiting today's webinar to receive a copy of Irresistible Value Propositions and to be entered into a raffle for 1 free copy of Amp Up Your Sales. And we really, really appreciate your interest in leverage points. So if you're interested in learning more or seeing a personalized value proposition, please check the appropriate boxes in the survey upon exiting today's webinar. All right, and to answer the most popular question myself, yes, this webinar is recorded and the slides and recording will be emailed to you within 2 business days. Now it's my pleasure to bring back Peyton for Q&A. So, all right, Peyton, here is the first question. What is the best kind of product to choose for an initial value proposition rollout?
That's a great question, Taylor. Thanks. So it's always a good idea to start with a strategically important product. How do you get people's attention to move this forward and get going? But also, it needs to be important in terms of the sales team's priorities. So strategically important and differentiated. The mistakes sometimes that we see made are trying to fix a dog. So you really want to start with a good value proposition for a good product that's important, and start simple.
Great, thank you. And you talked a lot about sales. So here's a question. How do you really get started with sales?
Okay, good related question, and maybe I'll start the answer with a good value proposition, which is strategically important, differentiated product in good form. But then as you begin to engage sales, and as I say, the broader universe of the pre-sales, sales engineer, solution consultants, those who are directly involved with customers, you really want to start with people who get it. And you want to start with them, and you want to provide all the support you can to them. So if you're an author trying to get your value proposition implemented, if you're a product manager trying to really move people into a crisper, clearer depiction of what your product does, volunteer to help them, volunteer to support them, identify your rock stars. And don't leave it to the rock stars as, oh, they get it, they can do it. They're the ones who actually you should work with most closely. And the reason is, one, you're going to learn a lot about your own value proposition. And two, you're going to be there for your earliest successes. And having those successes then helps make value and value propositions go viral.
Great, thanks. And I'm going to combine two questions here. So first, who should quantify the value? Product management, marketing, pricing, or sales? And what kind of challenges do you see with aligning those groups, especially sales and marketing, as they often see the world in different terms?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. And it's probably a setup for our August webinar. So, but I'll leave that description till later, because it's very interesting how those functions are evolving. You know, it's not that long ago that the world sort of boiled down to just marketing and sales. And now we've got the world of product management being distinct in some ways from marketing. We've got sales and the externally facing parts being distinct from pre-sales functions. So I'll deflect a little bit of that, but it's a good idea now to step back to your first question, which is who should quantify the value? And at a first level, it's everyone. Now, that begs the question of who at what stage. And I think it's very important to think about this question that way. Initially, you want to come up with a broadly useful, representative benchmark kind of value proposition. And it's based on benchmarks, it's based on general experience. It becomes a starting point for a business case, but it can be used early in the sales cycle. And I don't think there's much doubt that the natural quantifiers for that are some combination of product management and marketing. Every once in a while, you'll find for an existing product a great starting point, because you'll come across that pre-sales or technical salesperson or that solution consultant who actually has been building spreadsheets that you'd love to scale elsewhere in the organization. But for the most part, your product manager should be your natural source to come up with the benchmark or broadly applicable value proposition. But at later stages in the sales cycle, you're now getting to active use by the customer-facing team, and they're quantifying value maybe in some different ways. They are coming up with, they're starting with something general, but they're coming up with the specific business case. They're adapting initial content in a way that's going to deliver results and get through the final stages of the sales cycle.
Great, thanks. And here's another one for you. Should there be multiple value propositions for the same product depending on the customer or competitors competing in a particular sales deal? Do value propositions change that way?
And that's a great question. And the answer is very often yes. And here's what, and I say that without trying to make it overly complicated, because you want to make finding the content simple. But let's just take one example where you see more than one, for example, competitor situation applying in the same sales cycle for the same customer. It's funny how you may be selling a new piece of equipment and you're thinking initially that your natural reference alternative is a competing product. And so you build you take a value proposition, you modify it, you've done a good job in working through why you're the right choice. Then you get to the end of the sales cycle and somebody from finance says, wait a minute, why are we spending this money at all? And so all of a sudden your reference alternative has shifted. And you want your sales reps to be ready to deal with that. You want, when you're in a situation on why spend the money at all, you've got a value proposition that's now comparing your product to doing nothing. And those kinds of changes can happen. So the way I think of this is you want to build tools that let sales users switch very easily and fluidly within a typical customer situation. And you want to give them something that's easy as a starting point. And that's important too, because there may be a couple simple discovery questions they can ask up front that help zero down or zero in on the right circumstance. What is there, a few use cases of your potential product? Are they an end user or are they a reseller? And you may want very different value propositions on the way in, depending on some of those questions.
Great, thank you. And here's another one. How do you deal with a senior executive whose experience of value selling is a boiler room sales technique?
Boiler room. There's a term I haven't heard for a while, but it does take me back. So the first question, if you've got one of these kinds of circumstances, and I'm presuming this is a member of our team who just says, no, been there, I've done that, I've seen it blow up. First question to ask is, so why did that other situation go south? Because when I hear boiler room or whatever its modern equivalent is, I think of a world that looks like Glengarry Glen Ross. I think of a world where a sales process may lack transparency, where sales is working with a customer not on a collaborative basis at all. The notion of value propositions here is to have a transparent basis for customer collaboration. So ask the question why it went south, and then there's a simple answer to the objection, which is using value helps build results in greater opportunities, higher close rates, and higher prices. And the question is if we give people the right tools and we give people a few fundamentals on how to use them, what's the downside in that?
Great, thank you. And I think we have time for 2 more questions. So here's more of a strategic question, and maybe you can talk from experience here. Do you start with a customer by presenting the moderate value examples so you don't overstate things, or do you excite the customer with the best case scenario?
I think every sales user and every pre-sales user has their own style that probably fits with their personality and fits with their profile. And so exciting people, particularly with the results other people have realized, so that's use the aggressive assumptions early in the sales cycle. That can be a useful approach for a sales rep. If you're later in the sales cycle and you're really much more in an evaluative stage, you really being fair, being balanced, having defensible type assumptions, I think all that makes more sense. And again, often you've got a different set of objectives between a salesperson who's clearly aligned around closing the deal, and a pre-sales person who may go on to implementation, who's looking to become a trusted advisor.
Yeah, great points. And for the last question here, in your slides about how good do the data have to be, you talked about it as a problem for those quantifying the value. Isn't this an important sales objection as well?
Oh, great question. So the first question is it a sales objection or is it an excuse? So one useful way to get at this, right, is to look at your own company, look at your own situation, and bring the person back to the reality of quantifying and how good the data have to be by getting to the product and say, if your CEO got asked what the value proposition for this product is, what would they say? And that's not a stupid question, because CEOs and those dealing with the street are routinely talking about products and important products that they're rolling out, and they're routinely talking about higher price products, needing to justify and defend them to public audiences and maybe in the boardroom. So they are routinely having those conversations without precise data. Yet I think you'll find in most well-run companies, at least the great executives are able to do a 2-minute elevator pitch on the value proposition for their most important strategic product. The question, how good is their data? Well, guess what? They don't get a chance when they've got 2 minutes to ask any discovery questions. They don't have a chance when they've got 2 minutes to go, it depends. They need to have a clear, simple set of answers on where they're different and how that creates value.
Great, thank you, Peyton. And that's all the time we have for today, but if we didn't get to your question, we'll be sure to follow up accordingly. And just one quick reminder before you go, there is a webinar next month that we're hosting, Deliver Results with Value Selling, Key Ingredients for Success in B2B Sales Teams. This is a great follow-up to this webinar, diving deeper into some of the points that Peyton didn't hit today. So if you're interested in registering for this webinar, please check the appropriate boxes in the exit survey. And that's it from us for today. So thank you all for taking the time to join us, and a special thank you to Peyton for his insights. From all of us here at Leverage Point, have a wonderful rest of your week and take care.